Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to our latest stories. Before I start, tell me where you're watching me from. I wonder which cities and towns will join me in this memory that will follow me for years. He whispered my name, but lied. It's strange how a single sound, your name, spoken softly, can still echo in your chest long after the voice that said it has gone silent. His voice had that warmth that could disarm anyone, even someone like me who thought she'd long outgrown the age of believing in promises. But when he said my name, I believed him. I believed every word that followed, and that's where the story begins. It was early spring. The kind of day when the light comes in gently, like it's afraid to wake the world too fast. I remember standing in my kitchen, barefoot, holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold while I stared out the window. The trees were still half bare, and the air smelled of rain and earth. My phone buzzed on the counter, his name lighting up the screen, Daniel. We hadn't known each other long, just a few months. He'd started coming to the bookstore where I worked, one of those small independent ones tucked between a bakery and an antique shop. He always lingered longer than most, asking about books he'd already read, pretending not to notice that I knew. He had this way of asking questions that felt like invitations to linger. That day, when he texted me, he wrote, *, you busy after work? I almost didn't answer. But something in me, something restless, something curious, said yes. He picked me up that evening in a silver truck that looked like it had seen more sunsets than repairs. The sun was low, spreading gold across the road, and when I opened the door, I noticed he had 2 coffee cups waiting in the holder. Mine had a heart drawn on the lid with a marker. "Just a little guess," he said, grinning. "You strike me as a latte kind of woman." I laughed. "You got lucky." We drove out past the edge of town, to a hill where the fields stretched far enough to make the horizon look endless. It was quiet there, just the wind moving through dry grass and the faint hum of distant cars. He turned off the engine and leaned back, watching the sky as if it had answers he'd been waiting years to hear. "You ever think about how moments sneak up on you?" he asked suddenly. I looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you wake up one morning, thinking it's just another day, and then something happens. Something that changes how you see everything after." I didn't know what to say to that. Maybe because I felt it too. That sense that life, even at 47, could still surprise you. We talked for hours. About books, childhood memories, mistakes we didn't regret because they made us who we were. He told me about his late wife, the way she used to hum when she cooked. His eyes softened when he spoke of her, but there was pain too, quiet, steady pain that made me want to listen longer, as if listening could heal it. When the air grew colder, he turned to me. "You remind me of her," he said softly. The words caught me off guard. "I do. Not in how you look," he said. "In how you listen." Something inside me tightened, not fear, not exactly, more like the ache of recognition. The kind you feel when someone sees you too clearly. He whispered my name then, barely louder than the wind. And for a heartbeat, I believed I understood what it meant to be known. The drive back was quiet, but not uncomfortable. I watched the streetlights slide across his face, catching the faint lines around his eyes. When he dropped me off, he didn't ask to come in, just smiled and said, "You make the world sound softer when you talk." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the way he'd said my name like it was something precious. Days turned into weeks. We fell into a rhythm, shared lunches, long drives, messages that came in the middle of the night. There was something steady about him, something that made me lower my guard. My friends teased me for smiling more. Even my sister noticed. "You seem lighter," she said. And maybe I was. Then one afternoon, I found myself standing at the bookstore counter when a woman walked in. She was younger, maybe late 30s, her hair tied back neatly, her coat still damp from the rain. She looked around, hesitating, then came up to me. "Hi," she said. "Do you know if Daniel still comes here?" My heart paused. "Daniel?" "Yes," she said, with a faint smile. "Tall, kind eyes, drives a silver truck. I used to come here with him sometimes." The room felt smaller suddenly, the air heavier. "You used to?" I managed. Her smile wavered. "We're figuring things out again, I guess." He said he needed time to think, but I wanted to surprise him. He mentioned this place a lot. I felt the ground shift beneath me. Everything, his stories, his laughter, his gentle words, replayed in my head, only now the edges were sharper, the meaning different. She thanked me and left. I stood there for a long time after she'd gone, the bell above the door still echoing faintly. I don't remember much about the rest of that day, only that I kept hearing his voice. The way he'd said my name that night on the hill. It wasn't anger I felt. It was something quieter, heavier, the kind of sadness that comes from realizing you weren't lied to out of malice, but because someone was lost in their own truth. That evening, he texted me again. Just 3 words. Asterisk, can I call? Asterisk, I didn't answer. Not yet. Because I needed to understand something first, whether the connection we shared was real, or just something borrowed from someone else's story, and so I waited, staring out at the rain, listening to the faint echo of his whisper, wondering how something so gentle could carry such weight. That was the night I learned that honesty doesn't always come with warning signs. Sometimes it hides behind kindness, spoken softly in the dark. He whispered my name, but lied, and that lie, as small as it seemed, would change everything that followed. After that night, silence became its own kind of companion. It's strange how quiet can feel louder than words ever do, how you can almost hear the things that weren't said, echoing in the spaces between messages that never arrived. Daniel didn't call. Not that night, not the next. A week passed before his name appeared on my screen again. This time, no words, just a photo. A field. The same one where we'd watched the sun go down that first evening. Beneath it, he'd written, "I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long time. The image looked colder now, the grass dull, the sky grey. Funny how even the most beautiful places change when your heart does. I didn't reply right away. I went about my day as if nothing had shifted, helped customers, restocked shelves, listened to the hum of quiet conversations in the bookstore. But inside, a quiet war was going on. Part of me wanted to forgive him before I even heard the full truth. Another part, the one that had spent years building walls after being hurt before, refused to let him in so easily. When the shop closed, I sat on one of the old wooden stools near the window. The air smelled like paper and dust, and the streetlights cast long shadows across the floor. I finally typed, "We need to talk." He came the next day. I didn't expect him to, but there he was, standing by the window in that worn jacket he always wore, eyes tired, hands shoved into his pockets like a boy waiting to be scolded. "Hey," he said quietly, "hey." He looked around the shop, then back at me. "You found out?" I nodded. "She came here, Daniel. She was looking for you." He exhaled, his shoulders sinking. "I know. She told me." "You lied to me," I said. My voice didn't break, but it wanted to. I didn't mean to. I laughed softly, not out of humor, but disbelief. People never mean to, do they? They just do. He stepped closer, hesitant. "I wasn't ready to tell you everything. I didn't plan for any of this for you. I thought I could keep things separate until I figured it out." "And what exactly were you figuring out?" "Whether I was capable of starting over," he said. "Whether I could feel something again and not ruin it." His words were calm, but his eyes told a different story: guilt, confusion, maybe even fear. I wanted to be angry, but I also knew what it meant to be broken and unsure. Still, I couldn't let that excuse it. "You could have told me the truth," I said. "You didn't have to protect me from something I had the right to know." He looked down, nodding. "You're right." The silence between us stretched again. I could hear the ticking of the clock behind the counter, the rustle of a page turning somewhere in the back room. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. "I don't hate you, Daniel," I said finally. "But I can't pretend this didn't hurt." "I never wanted to hurt you," he whispered. "You were the first person who made me feel steady, like I could breathe again." And then, there it was, the same softness in his voice, the same warmth that had once felt like safety. Only now, it carried the weight of a truth too late spoken. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked past him to the door and opened it. The bell above it jingled faintly. "Take care of yourself," I said. He hesitated, then walked out. I watched him cross the street, hands in his pockets, head low against the wind. When he turned the corner, he didn't look back. That night, I went home and sat in the dark. The house felt too quiet, too big. I thought about all the conversations we'd had about his wife, about loss, about second chances. Maybe I'd been a chapter he needed to turn in order to find closure. And maybe I'd needed him to remind me that my heart still worked, even when it hurt. A few days later, I went back to the hill. I don't know why, maybe to face the part of myself that had believed too easily. The grass had started to turn green again, and the sky was soft with clouds. I sat where we'd parked, and for a while, I let the wind do the talking. I realized then that sometimes people lie not because they want to deceive, but because they're scared of what honesty might take away. And sometimes, it takes being lied to for you to see your own strength clearly. When I stood to leave, I whispered something, not his name, but my own. It was my way of reclaiming it, of reminding myself that I still belonged to me, not to his unfinished story. And as I walked back to my car, I thought, healing doesn't always begin with closure. Sometimes, it starts with letting go quietly, without anyone noticing, but life has a way of circling back. And though I didn't know it then, that wouldn't be the last time I heard Daniel's voice. Weeks passed. The quiet that had followed him leaving became a constant companion, but not in the way I'd expected. It wasn't oppressive, it was reflective. I found myself noticing details I'd ignored before: the way sunlight hit the corner of the kitchen in the late afternoon, the faint smell of rain on the pavement, even the subtle rhythm of customers flipping pages in the bookstore. It was as if the world had slowed, letting me process each moment fully, without distraction. Then one morning, a letter arrived. No envelope, just a folded sheet of paper in Daniel's unmistakable handwriting. I unfolded it carefully, my hands trembling slightly. I know I can't undo the past. I know my silence caused more pain than words could ever heal. But I need you to understand everything I felt, everything I shared, was true, even if it was tangled with fear and mistakes. I don't expect anything from you, not forgiveness, not an answer. I just needed you to know that you mattered to me, in ways I can't fully explain. I read it again and again, the words settling into me like rain soaking into dry soil. There was regret, yes, but also a clarity I hadn't expected. For the first time since that evening on the hill, I felt a strange sense of peace. Not because he had fixed anything, but because he had acknowledged the truth in a way that couldn't be ignored. I tucked the letter into my journal and carried on with my day. The bookstore felt warmer that morning, sunlight streaming through the windows in golden streaks. I realized that part of me had been holding on to the lie, not him, not even what he'd done, but the version of me that had believed everything he whispered. That part of me needed to grow, to accept complexity without resentment. A few days later, Daniel called. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity and a subtle yearning I hadn't fully admitted. One hello? My voice was steadier than I'd expected. Hi, he said, a simple word, but heavy with the weight of months. I hope I'm not disturbing you. You're not, I said, surprising myself with the calmness in my tone. There was a pause, then he spoke again, softer this time. I've been thinking about that hill, about the way I said your name that night. I want you to know that wasn't a lie in feeling. I meant every word in the moment. I just got lost in the wrong way of showing it. I listened, the hum of the refrigerator in the background grounding me. I understand, I said quietly. It wasn't full forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. It was recognition that our shared moments, even flawed, had been real. Over the next hour, we spoke carefully, tentatively. Not about blame, not about the past, but about stories we hadn't shared, things we'd learned about ourselves while navigating life's unpredictability. There was laughter, a few moments of awkwardness, and a deeper understanding settling between us. He told me about the woman who had appeared in my life like a shadow I hadn't expected. She hadn't been a replacement, she had been someone from his past who still carried part of his heart. And he had been scared, not of her, not really, but of what honesty would mean to someone new, someone he didn't want to hurt. I told him about the nights I spent replaying our conversations, wondering what had been real, wondering if I'd imagined the warmth in his words. I admitted my fear of trusting again, my hesitation to allow someone back into the spaces of my heart that had once been tender and unguarded. By the time we hung up, it wasn't closure in the final sense, but it was progress. We had built a bridge of understanding, one that might never lead to the same path we had been walking together, but a bridge nonetheless. Later that evening, I went back to the hill. The sky was painted in the soft hues of twilight, and the wind carried the faint scent of earth and new growth. I sat on the same spot where he had whispered my name, closed my eyes, and let the memories wash over me. I realized then that being lied to hadn't been the end of my story. It had been a beginning, a chance to understand not just him, but myself. To see that the heart can hold more than anger or disappointment, that it can hold reflection, empathy, and growth. As I drove home, the city lights flickering past, I smiled softly to myself. Life had a way of showing its lessons gently, even in the guise of deception. And in that lesson, I had found something precious. The courage to trust, not blindly, but with awareness. He whispered my name. And though he had lied, the experience had carved a space within me that could never be taken away, a space for understanding, for healing, for acceptance. And I knew, even then, that my journey with him, in whatever form it would take next, had only just begun. Weeks became months. The rhythm of life returned to its familiar cadence, but something had shifted inside me, subtle, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable. I noticed it in the way I lingered over my morning coffee, how I paused at the edge of the sidewalk before crossing the street, and how I listened to the laughter of strangers in the bookstore with a quiet appreciation I hadn't felt before. Those small moments were no longer ordinary. They were reminders that life, even after disappointment, held a delicate beauty. Daniel and I stayed in touch, carefully, deliberately. Not every conversation was easy. There were moments of hesitation, of words left unsaid, of questions too heavy to ask aloud. But there was honesty now, even in the silence. That honesty, fragile yet steadfast, felt like a bridge connecting the person I was with the person I was learning to become. One late afternoon, I found myself walking through a park on the edge of town, the sunlight filtering through the leaves in patches of gold and amber. I hadn't intended to meet anyone, but there he was, leaning against a tree as if he had always belonged there. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the years of uncertainty collapsed into a single, clear instant. "Hi," he said softly, a small, almost tentative smile tugging at his lips. "Hi," I replied, my voice calm but steady, carrying the weight of all the conversations, all the moments of reflection, all the unspoken understanding between us. We walked together, side by side, letting the silence speak when words were too cumbersome. The path wound through the park, leading us past ponds that reflected the sky like mirrors, past benches where lovers and friends had paused over fleeting moments of conversation. Each step was measured, intentional, a quiet acknowledgement of the trust we were rebuilding. "I've been thinking a lot about that night on the hill," he said finally, his voice low, carrying a mix of regret and reflection. "About the way I said your name and what followed. I wish I had been braver. I wish I had been honest sooner." "I know," I said. "And I also know that what happened, it's part of our story now. Not the story we expected, maybe, but ours all the same." His eyes softened, and I felt the subtle shift of tension dissolving between us. There was no anger, no blame, only acknowledgement, a mutual understanding that the past could not be undone, but the present could be approached with care. We sat on a bench overlooking the pond, the water reflecting the golden hues of late afternoon. I watched the ripples spread outward, thinking about how small actions, like whispers or omissions, could have far-reaching effects. And yet, like the water, time had a way of smoothing edges, softening the sharpness of hurt, revealing the beauty that comes from learning, forgiving, and moving forward. "I don't want to repeat mistakes," he said quietly. "Not with you. Not with anyone." "You won't," I assured him. "Not if we continue this way, with honesty, with respect, with patience." We talked for hours, sharing stories of our separate journeys, moments of discovery, and the lessons life had taught us while we navigated our own paths. There was laughter, gentle teasing, the warmth of shared understanding that comes from people who have learned to see each other clearly. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of purple and rose, I realized that the experience with Daniel had changed me profoundly. He had shown me that trust is fragile, that hearts can be vulnerable, and that growth often comes wrapped in moments of discomfort and unexpected revelation. When it was time to leave, we walked back slowly, the cool evening air carrying the scent of earth and fading flowers. I felt no bitterness, no lingering pain, only a deep sense of appreciation. For him, for myself, and for the journey we had taken together. Standing at my doorstep, I turned to him, and for the first time since this all began, I felt a quiet certainty. "Thank you," I said. "For being honest now, for being part of this chapter of my life." He smiled, a genuine, soft smile that spoke of understanding and respect. "Thank you," he replied, "for giving me a chance, even after everything." As I stepped inside, I felt the full weight of what had transpired, the lies, the whispers, the uncertainties, and I realized that each had led to something invaluable: growth, clarity, and the profound beauty of human connection. He whispered my name, and even though he had lied, the experience had become a testament to resilience, to trust rebuilt, and to the quiet, transformative power of truth finally spoken. And as I closed the door behind me, I smiled softly to myself, knowing that the lessons of this story would remain with me forever, gentle reminders that even through deception and doubt, hearts can heal, understanding can flourish, and life can surprise you in the most unexpected, yet deeply meaningful ways.